Hello, my name is Twilan Combo.
And my name is Ben Combo.
Welcome to Relate. If you are watching this, don't be greedy, don't be shy. Share this with at least 3 people. You don't want to watch this alone.
And also ensure that you subscribe so that each time that we drop a video, you'll be notified and you can enjoy that content with us, right?
Yeah. And without further ado, we're going to go straight into today's episode.
Let's go straight into it.
We're going to go straight into today's discussion. We want to talk about how to resolve conflict in a healthy and mature way. That's the discussion on the table today. So stay tuned because we want to dive into very specific points on, conflict resolution in a healthy and mature way.
And, even without providing a definition of word conflict, I think we all know what conflict is. We've been in conflict with our partners. That's if you are married, or if you're in relationships, you equally may have had 1 or 2, conflicting situations that you've had to face. But then the question is, how do you resolve conflict in a healthy way? Because we understand that some, conflict by its nature, is not, healthy. Would we say conflict is healthy?
It depends on how you're looking at it.
Uh-huh.
And first of all, I want to say, I know people out there know what conflict means. We know what conflict means. But for the sake of just being on the same page and for the sake of context, when we're talking about conflicts, we're talking about, those disagreements, those arguments, and whether you want to call them heated, extremely heated, or very little disagreements, very small arguments, whatever the spectrum might be, that's what we're referring to. So when you're asking me whether conflict is a good thing or a bad thing, is that what you asked, a positive or negative thing?
Is it healthy? Is it always healthy?
I think it depends on how it is processed, how it's received. In a business point of view, I remember speaking to you about this a couple of days ago when I used to work for a bank. We had a different manager, but then a different branch manager came in and he was very, motivational. Come on, team, we can do this. And he ended up making a whole speech every single morning about how we should love complaints, because we used to complain about people coming to make complaints. And he said the company that loves complaints performs well because they listen to the dissatisfaction of their customers and
for the purpose of making improvements.
Exactly. So when we're talking about conflict, and I'm sure we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, if you approach it from that perspective, I think wherever you see conflict in your relationship, depending on how it's received and processed, it can actually be a healthy thing. Like the same complaint doesn't have to come up if you address it well.
So meaning if a conflict is handled well, then it is healthy. It
has a potential to actually pivot the maturity of that relationship to the next stage. Yeah. But the issue is when conflict comes, most people perceive it very negatively, and rightfully so, because a conflict ain't pretty.
Yeah.
It's very.
You're not thinking, okay, this is feedback for the purpose of improvement.
Yes, no. I'm going to address
it feels like
this.
An attack.
Right, it often does.
It does.
But actually, which brings me to our first point together, which we both agreed on. And I love the fact that we went away to separately prepare, but when we came back, even without telling each other, this point was our first point, and feeds in really well with, taking on feedback when there's conflict. Brings us to the first point, which is self-reflection. So we're going to talk about 4 key points within those who have got your notebooks or want to actually process conflict within your relationships better. We're going to talk about 4 key points. Maybe I should highlight what those 4 key points are, and then we'll go back to talk about the first one. So self-reflection is the first point, accountability being the second, disengage to engage being the third, and restoration. And restoration essentially is that place where you have resolved your conflict in a mature and healthy way. So with self-reflection, you were just talking about, we were both saying about conflict is not often received well. It feels like an attack, but I wonder if we would change our perspective. And you could have this heated argument, disagreement with your partner, but then maybe certain things that they say in that moment stick. And I wonder what beauty there would be in taking some of those things away, that ouch, they hurt, because the truth hurts is what they say, right?
Yeah.
But then being able to use that and self-reflect, could there actually be some truth in this?
But again, I would also say that sometimes it's not that, when you're in a conflict, that someone is telling you something that it's truth, because you have your truth in the moment. And that's what actually pushes you to want to fight more, because you in conflict, you are also standing on your own truth.
Yes, yeah.
And while the other person is also trying to
everybody
stand on
has their own truth, but there is only one truth, and the truth that sets people free is actually being able, because when people say this is my truth, usually it's coming from a place of pride. You are self-preserving, you are also in a way being defensive. But when you can objectively look at what has been said, especially if the couple have got to the stage where you trust that your partner has your best interest at heart. If obviously we are dealing with situations where, there's abuse, there's, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, that's a whole different story, because clearly some of the things that might be said during conflict may be to intentionally hurt you by the person who's speaking those things. So we've got to be careful there. And that I think that's the caveat.
And I can add another caveat as well, that conflict should not be a lifestyle.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you have conflict every now and then, I think, it's easier to resolve. But if conflict is every single day, then there's some fundamental
things that need addressing.
Need addressing.
Something wrong with the foundation.
Yeah. Because as much as conflict can be resolved in a healthy way, but if you're having to resolve conflict in a healthy way all the time, then it becomes
it's like being sick all the time to get healed. Wouldn't you rather just live healthy?
Yeah,
right.
Everyone would want that,
right?
And not be in a state of constantly having to take remedy or medication to restore back. And imagine, even before you finish your dose for today, you're already taking another. You've picked on another. Conflict issue that is coming in again. I think that is unhealthy. So,
and just as we are on self-reflection, before we move on to the next part, Genesis 3:9, I believe, is where the conversation happens, where God comes down and he's calling to Adam, where are you? And I loved that when I was doing my study for how to resolve conflicts and arrived at self-reflection, it was actually anchored on that scripture when God says to Adam, where are you? And I realized, obviously, we've had several sermons about this online from different pastors to say God wasn't asking Adam where he was because he didn't know. But in my study, I discovered it was more about giving Adam this unique opportunity to self-reflect. Because when he's being asked, where are you? And when we look at his response, he was hiding because he was naked. And God obviously goes on, who told you were naked? But when I saw that, Adam, where are you? And I was thinking the context of our discussion today, when we find ourselves having these conflicts with our partners, with our husbands, our wives, or, whatever conflict scenario you're in, the first thing to do is self-reflect. Ask yourself, where am I? Who am I in this? What contribution have I brought to the table to amplify this conflict? Because we often, when there's a conflict, we want to point fingers at the other one. And when you read Genesis 3, you will find there's a lot of finger pointing at the fall of man. Adam says, well, it's the woman you gave me. And Eve says, well, it's the snake. And God, in his mercy, brings all parties involved. And for lack of a better word, he punishes them according to their own contribution to this conflict called the fall of man. to Eve. She now has to, have pain when she gives birth. Adam, he curses the ground, but he needs to, his harvest is not easy anymore. And the snake now has to crawl. So when we're thinking about the first step to resolve conflict in your marriage, in your relationship, in your workplace, in a mature and healthy way, it all comes down to you, baby girl. It all comes down to you, sir. You have to ask yourself, who am I? Where am I? Adam, speak to yourself. Adam, where am I? Where are you in this? What contribution did you bring to this conflict, rather than, somebody needs to hear this sermon. He should be here to hear this. No. Who are you? What did you do to contribute to this? What would you say to that point?
I think I would say that just as you were speaking, I'm also just realizing something as from God's perspective, because God already knew what Adam had done. So he didn't come by saying, how could you do such a thing?
Right.
But he says, where are you instead? I think too, it's because he knows that, maybe that approach will cause him to self-reflect as opposed to, aggravate, or rather to infuriate him by just coming straight to blame him, because he's got an excuse as to why he did what he did. So if you come and say, how could you do such a thing? He would obviously also maybe be looking at God and saying, no, what do you mean, how could I? Is it me? Or was it the woman that you brought?
And actually, that is exactly what he did. I love that. I didn't even see that in my study, but I love the fact that, and that's what we do in our relationships when, the where are you comes in. Instead of giving opportunity to your friend to reflect, we go in with accusations. It's because of you that this has happened. It's because of you that we are fighting. It's because of you that there's not an opportunity created. So perhaps that's also tying into self-reflection. And this is for both parties involved. If we're talking in the context of marriage, if the husband can have a moment of self-reflection, the wife have a moment of self-reflection, if both parties are doing the same, it's a wonderful thing. And then you don't feel attacked by your spouse. You have that moment to self-reflect.
Can I just add to that as well?
Yeah, sure.
And I think also when it comes to reflection, you have to look at your previous conflicts in the past to try and get some understanding, to see what triggers you.
There's a pattern.
So observe how your emotions escalate, when they escalate, and how they escalate, so that you can then use that information from previous conflicts, because the goal is to eliminate
that conflict reoccurring.
Yeah, it's right. So that you can have a form of how to deal with it, because if you keep dealing with it the same, you keep having the same outcome.
Yeah.
So wisdom demands that you reflect on past conflict, see where you are wrong, self-reflection. That's why it's self and not other person reflection. Yeah. So self means you're looking at yourself by seeing how you contributed to the conflict, because the consequences shared, as in the case of Adam and Eve. As much as Adam says, I was not the main reason, but you still had a part to play, even if you are not the guilty one, and you're trying to say that your wife is the guilty one, but still more. So that's why it's important to self-reflect, to look at how you contributed to, how you approached it in the first place. Did you approach it the right way, or was it a wrong approach?
I also want to just kind of say to this point that conflict is a shared and joint effort, as much as conflict resolution is a joint and shared effort.
Yeah.
And we see that right from the get-go, when God, gives each one according to the measure of their contribution. His response to Adam is for Adam, what Adam consequently must suffer, what Eve must consequently suffer, and the snake equally. So when we're talking about resolving conflict in a mature and healthy way, and you're listening to this and you had an argument with your spouse, it's time to self-reflect, and let's move on from finger pointing, because finger pointing doesn't resolve issues, but self-reflection definitely does. Our next point is accountability, and for the sake of time, we might need to give you the real key points to these points. With accountability, there's I suppose 5 key points within the accountability aspects that you need to think about that I came across, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The easiest way to remember is the acronym CORRECT, and correct is spelled with a double R in actual English, right? But this acronym is just with one R, because the first C stands for consequence. That's under accountability. So these are kind of the ingredients of accountability that make up a healthy resolution to your conflicts within your marriage, your relationship, a work environment, whatever. The first C being consequence. Then you have ownership. Then you have responsibility. Then you have explanation. Then you have caution and trust. So under consequence, we're talking about, accepting the actions and the results that are being readily taken. So when you have that conflict and you self-reflect, because remember, that's the first stage, you are accepting the consequences that come with it. Going back to Adam and Eve, they had no choice but to accept the consequences. The snake is still crawling on its belly today because of it. So, and I guess that conflict would never come up again, because the snake maybe doesn't want to do ×2 punishment. It's already got its own lifetime. So with that, I kind of want to highlight that we need to be really careful in marriages and in relationships, because there are certain actions that could lead to our whole entire generation changing, our whole lifestyle changing. Just like Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, cherubims placed at the door so they couldn't get back in. Now they have to work hard. Just like the snake now has to crawl for the rest of its life, it becomes enmity between the woman and the man. So when we're thinking about consequences, you've also got to think, when there's these conflicts rising up in your relationship, are you really prepared for the consequences that come with that? Some of them are life-changing. They cause a disability that is permanent, like the snake. So these are things that we need to really be really mindful of when we're thinking about accountability. I'm just going to give my points, then babe, maybe you can add to those. Ownership. Are you willing to take ownership? It's pretty much the same thing, really. The consequences that come. Are you recognizing where you need to take ownership? A lot of people will, like we've already said, a conflict comes up. Well, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done that. No, you are responsible for your own actions. I've heard people say, I wonder what would have happened when the snake said to Eve, eat this fruit. And she's like, oh no, I don't. And then she eats the fruit, but then gives it to her husband. Wonder what would have happened if Adam said, what have you done? Let's pray, let's repent, or whatever, if repentance was a thing then. But I wonder, because as much as Adam said, it's the wife you gave me, he decided to eat what the wife gave him. And he was actually right there when she was being enticed by the snake. So being able to take ownership of your own contribution to that conflict is a way of being accountable.
No matter how small your contribution.
No matter how small. And that's another big thing. Because it's like, no, if she didn't eat the fruit, then I wouldn't have had it being given to me. But the bigger question, I always ask this, especially, for example, when God was looking for somebody to take the king off of his seat, and he said, who shall I send? And the lying spirit said, send me. And God sent that lying spirit that entered 400 prophets. The question isn't so much the lying spirit, because God can use anything. My question there is always, what is it about these 400 prophets that the lying spirit could enter and find a home in? They had the capacity to house it. except for one prophet who spoke the truth. The same thing when Judas Iscariot, the spirit came over him. Yes, he was chosen for the job, but there must have been something about his personality, character, that was a house for selling Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So when we're talking about ownership and recognizing what is it about you that can house whatever it is that you've done to contribute to the and addressing that and really being objective about that, and not seeing it as an attack when your friend or your spouse brings it to your attention. What do you think, babe?
Yeah, very true, very true. And also just in ownership and accountability, I think there's two things that also need to happen. You need to break down the motive and the behavior to understand, because you could be arguing from the point of motive to say, no, the behavior is not right, but the motive is right. Does it make sense? Or
expand on that.
So, I could do something and yet my motive was correct, but then the behavior is incorrect. Let's just say that in the midst of conflict, I walk out. Angrily, I shut the door and I don't return maybe for a week, and then the other person starts to get worried in the end. And by the time
I would get worried if you didn't come back in a week.
In a week, yes. And then when I come back and I tell you no, I needed a space. So the motive is right, but the action is not correct.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So your motive, yes, is correct that you needed to have your time away, but your behavior is not,
and a week is too long. You're married for a week. Wait.
Yeah, but then I could justify and say that, I really needed the time and space, and that's why
that
I
would
say
just
that
bring a whole lot of problems.
No, and
I think that's where communication and thing comes in. I'm assuming you'd have communicated that, like,
no, let's say you don't communicate because you just want your time alone.
No, that behavior is well off.
Yeah, so that's why I say that sometimes people want to justify their behavior based on motive, and that's why you have to separate the motive and look at, okay, my motive was
also
was
you
right.
know your motive, but I may not know.
I may not know the motive.
Right.
Yeah. So,
they may know, but you don't know, or vice versa. Yeah. So it's that's a good point.
So when the person understands both, because sometimes you could be fighting. You the reason for your conflict is the behavior, not necessarily the motive. Yeah. So if you understand to say, okay, no, so what was the motive? Okay, so that's the motive. I see. But what was the behavior? Where was the problem?
That is so good, because actually a lot of conflicts are hanging on what somebody did, the behavior,
instead of
but we don't take time to explain the motive or even hear it when it's shared. Actually, a lot of the times we're not listening. We heard what the person said, but we didn't really hear what they said, because
so you hang on to the
behavior. They even did this, they even did that, but they were gone for a week. They slammed the door, but you didn't. And by the way, we're not condoning slamming doors and leaving for a week when you're a married person and not communicating. We're
just saying that how can you communicate your motives better next time? Or what behaviors can your intentions wear next time to deliver something that's close to what you're, because the slamming of door could just be that, my emotions were up there. So the behavior may look that bad. Is because of what I was feeling at the moment, and what you were feeling has also got a reason behind. So there's a lot of interrelation between motive and behavior. So if you can break down the two, it would also help you to say, okay, so as much as my intent was right, my behavior was not right for having gone for a week, right? So meaning next time we have such a thing and I need time, it's either I inform you that I'm going to go away for a few days, you can reach me if you want, and I'm not just going to keep quiet. That way you are changing the behavior slightly, but the motive is still remaining the same. Or, because there could be other times when the behavior is correct, but the intent is also wrong.
Well, that's a tricky
But that's
one.
manipulation.
That, yeah.
Where you're doing,
Yeah.
you are using a behavior that looks like it's got a
Like,
right
yeah.
motive, but then it's got a wrong motive, and that's what.
And that will also show up in the pattern, because
Yeah.
you'll end up having the conflict about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were sorry, you said you've changed, and then the same thing has happened because there was no true repentance. There was no
motive
real
of change.
Accountability. Yeah, there was no motive for change.
There was just motive of,
let's keep the peace. Let's
keep the peace.
hush.
Yeah, but I'll continue doing the same thing.
I'll do my thing. You figure yourself out.
Yeah.
So we've talked about consequence. We've talked about ownership. We are gonna cruise through this because we've got a couple of points still yet to give. So this is under accountability. You want to be able to accept the consequences, recognize the things that you have to take ownership for, the actions you're taking ownership for. Taking responsibility. I think we've already covered this, and it's responsibility for your goals and the behaviors, which you've really just explained. Explanation, again, I think we've actually talked about this thoroughly with the examples we've just gave. So providing a reason for success and failure, providing an explanation for why you're doing what you're doing. I'm going away for a week. I need space. And you both need to figure out what that looks like. Decide what that space looks like for each one of you. Or at least the person who needs that space, because not everybody needs space. Not everybody needs to step away. Some people are okay being there. I think I'm that person. He's the
Some
space
people
type person.
will be around but quiet.
Yes.
Some people will be away and not want to engage.
And it's about being able to
understand the behavior.
Yeah.
To say, okay, I'm doing this behavior is not as
retaliation.
Retaliation. It is just a recovery, position.
Yeah.
Once I'm recovered, I will come back to my normal position.
And I think once that is explained by the person doing it, hopefully the person who is a receiving end of that kind of conflict resolution style is more understanding. It may be hard at the beginning for those that's not your default, but when you understand that that's how your friend deals with it, and hopefully when they come back, you can now pick up with a more mature conversation.
But also don't abuse the behaviors.
Go for a 1 week holiday.
I'm going for 1 week to
1 week is a lot. Actually,
what I'm trying to drive at is, you say that you're going for 1 week because you need time alone, but actually it's just a mechanism for you to run away and go and do more nonsense. Do you get the idea? So instead of using it for the
Holy
intention
Spirit
that you have given it, you are using it as a means to just get some freedom to go and do further stuff that might
further things that will cause.
So intent and behavior must match.
That's good. Intent and behavior must match. So under accountability, then the last 2 points would be caution and trust. And I want to talk about those, kind of parallel to each other. To be cautious or to take caution, we're really talking about how we speak to each other, being able to be kind in our words. If you swear at each other, this is a moment, an invitation for me to say, Adam, where are you? To say, swearing and all that, kind of abusive behaviors can really be a distraction. It can really be a distraction. So being cautious of how we present. Some people aren't swearing. We are just maybe like getting up in your partner's face, and there's such a thing as personal space. Some people are unaware of personal space, or they are aware, but except in a conflict or in a disagreement, and you get up in their face. That's quite what's the word? It's
you agitate the person.
You agitate the person even more. So being cautious of your non-verbal or verbal ways of communicating, even in that moment, is so important, because it's what they will remember, how you made them feel. If you made them feel very agitated by getting in their space, or you slammed the door, or you did this, you did that, it's those small nuances that they'll remember. That those are the things, I think, that when you come back to apologize, unfortunately, sometimes those things stick more than the apology, because you need to give the person time to come back to their normal base of how they relate with you. And the final thing would be trust.
Can I also add on that one before you run off?
Yeah.
I think I remember in my younger days, one of the foolish things that I used to do in conflict is you are deliberately saying the things that will hurt them for the sake of driving a point. So you say, that's why your mother even thinks you are this. So it's like you are trying to bring up other things that are unrelated to drive your own point, because you feel that, and in such cases, it means that you don't have enough convincing position to help the person understand. And therefore you bring in other hurtful things to let them feel as though what they have done is really bad and they can't do that again, because this one thinks of you like this one thinks of you like this, and then that ends up hurting a person. So don't deliberately just strike at a person to drive down hurt in trying to drive down a point.
Love that. And so far, as we round up this discussion, we have talked about healthy ways of resolving conflict in a mature and healthy way is by, first of all, starting with self-reflection. Who am I? What have I done to add to this conflict? And each party involved to do that for themselves. Second point is accountability, and under accountability, we've talked about the acronym CORRECT, spelt with one R. The first C standing for consequence. What consequences have come as a result of your contribution to this that you now need to take ownership, that you also need to be responsible for, that you have to explain your actions to your spouse, your partner, that you have to be cautious about how you speak to one another, to help you both, finally, with the last point, build trust and confidence, and also be a reliable and transparent other half, because that's what accountability will do. It will show you, he's got my best interest at heart. For me, 100%, I can say I do know that my husband has got his best interest at heart. And that's why sometimes when certain things he's done that don't align with what I know about him, it's easier for me to put a question mark on that and bring it to his attention, because I know that through certain things that we've been through together, there's a certain level of trust that has been placed in my emotional bank towards him. And so being able to safeguard that is really important. We're going to move on to the last two parts of this discussion, because I know that we're already over our time. So I suppose we could probably merge these two together, because they go, well, no, we can't. Disengage to engage is our third point.
Yeah. So I think maybe we'll just be quick on disengage to engage, because in a conflict, the chances are that your emotions are flaring. And when you notice that your emotions are flaring, even before, if you can realize the fact that you are getting to that place where you are, your emotions will be up there and the conversation will be taken out of context, is you can disengage, not for the sake of just disengaging, but so that you can re-engage when your emotions are back there. Because when your emotions are up there and you are engaging, you're going to engage at the level of your emotions.
Right.
So when you see that your emotions are high, disengage, come back and re-engage when things are calmer. So it's not to run away from the conversation, but you're just disengaging to calm the emotions down. And when you calm the emotions down, reason will kick back in. And when reason has kicked back in, then you can have a meaningful conversation. Because a conversation at the height of negative emotions is going to be more
damaging, yeah,
then it would be helpful. But if you disengage and then engage when things are better, then that will be good. But it also requires both of you to understand, because for another person, when you disengage, it could infuriate them because of they want an answer right there and then. And you're disengaging. It's as if you don't care.
You're disrespecting
you disrespect them, because in that moment for them they want everything to be talked about, but then they are forgetting that the emotions are high, and therefore and then also it could be that they maybe can manage themselves better even at the height of emotions, and the other person, when they get to that height of emotion, their behavior may be 10 times more, which will escalate the conflict even more. So it's important to understand that. Any addition?
No, I think you pretty much said it all. I would just say, the communication aspect, when you are the type who needs to disengage to engage, is so important, because most likely you are with a partner who doesn't do disengage to engage. And so if they can understand why you're doing that action, why that behavior, they will not attach it to a negative thing. They will actually see that you're trying to resolve the issue as best as you can. And really that brings us to the final point, where we're talking about restoration, which is really what everybody wants in a conflict, to resolve it to the place of restoration. And really this point of restoration is a summary of everything that we talked about, because you can't get to restoration without self-reflecting, and you shouldn't leave self-reflection to one person only. And this is particularly to the couples that have one person who thinks their spouse is the one who's always in the wrong. These points will not work. You will not be at restoration point if you think self-reflection is not for you. Self-reflection is for both of you. And like my husband said, it doesn't matter who had the biggest error or the smallest error. Sin is sin. If you open a little door for the devil, he's going to take the big step. So even if your partner did the bigger thing out of, and it shouldn't even be put on a weighing scale like that, because regardless of how small your actions may be, if they continue to be small actions over time, they will weigh that marriage down. They will weigh that relationship down. So restoration, we don't even want to labor on it, because you will get to restoration automatically if you are self-reflective, and if you take the responsibility to be accountable, and all those elements we talked about under accountability. So all roads lead to restoration in marriage, in conflict resolution, only if the people who are on that road are willing to self-reflect and be accountable.
Very true. And also, in restoration, it's important that if the conflicts are constant, usually the person who may be causing this maybe even knows, but they keep repeating the behavior, which keeps bringing back the conflict. So the point of restoration is making sure that you make amends to the behaviors that are bringing the conflict. As long as there is no change in that area, there cannot be restoration. So restoration is not a cover up of wrong behavior. Yeah. It's a I think it's a road that both of you have to be willing to get to by amending both your behaviors. Right. The one who may have the smallest consequence is how can you still handle things better in the future. The one with the biggest cause in that conflict also may have to look at how they can amend their own behavior. So everyone at every stage, both the husband and the wife, have got things to change. Yeah. For restoration to take place.
One thing that I forgot to mention, I know we're out of time, but in my study, when I looked at this restoration, I saw how God chases Adam and Eve out of the garden, places the cherubims there, and I was thinking about how restoration after the fall, and the fall is what we're discussing today as a conflict resolution, happens within a relationship, a marriage, a home. sometimes restoration doesn't look like going back to your Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve never went back to the Garden of Ease. That's what I ended up calling it. Because of the action they had done, and the consequences were life-changing. They were permanent. So that looked like restoration had to take place in a very completely different environment. It took on a very different shape. So for the couples who have experienced life-changing consequences, maybe there was infidelity and now the other woman has a child, or, there's been rape, incest in the family, or there's been a loss of huge amounts of money, or even becoming homeless because of what your spouse did. For those who have all these big issues that have caused a conflict, I want you to know that in my study, what I strongly felt the Lord highlighting was that for Adam and Eve, we don't hear that they had a divorce when they left the Garden of Ease. The Bible calls it the Garden of Eden, but for the sake of this discussion, it's the Garden of Ease. They never get into this contention. You let us lose our house. You cheated. You did this. They kind of just got on with life. There was a restoration in their marriage, in their relationship. That was the first conflict ever in humankind, because there was finger pointing, as we highlighted. But I need those couples who have experienced traumatic, life-changing experiences that have caused trauma or even, unexplainable conflicts within your home, that restoration is possible, even if it means you're not going back to the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Ease, but God will somehow watch over you, even while you're outside tilling the ground, giving birth to babies in pain, which wasn't the case before. So in a nutshell, conflict resolution is possible. It may just look slightly different for different people, but self-reflection and accountability are key to bring you to that place of restoration.
And like you've said, certain consequences are permanent, and are also multi-generational because of the consequence that Adam and Eve went through. You can see it also trickle down now to their children, Cain and Abel. The same, it's the consequence that brought about the change in environment, the change in conditions, also brought about a change in behavior in the children, which up to now, until Jesus came to come and change that. So it means that it can actually even be, the consequences can go beyond. And that's why, for example, you say that in a case where infidelity has happened and now a child is born outside wedlock, and that child has to grow up in a different environment that will affect them because maybe they're not with a father, and then they are going to also affect their children. So we also need to be very careful how we behave and our actions, that we have within a relationship. Don't deliberately cause conflict. Let conflict be issues that maybe you didn't anticipate, or it just happened, not because you're deliberately causing the conflict. I think with that said, is there any more that you would add on that?
Let us know if you need any help. We're here to help. We are human just like you. We have had our own conflicts. And in fact, some of the things that we are sharing, or the points we're sharing, have been as a result of our own personal reflections of how we can manage our disagreements better. So we're certainly not coming from a place of we got a PhD in or we are perfect in that. But if you need our help, reach out to us. Let us know. Comment on this video, write to us. I'm sure there'll be an email address you can reach us out. We'll be happy to hear from you. And With that said, appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I hope that you had an amazing time listening to that episode, but more importantly, we really hope that what we shared has helped you pick one or two things to help your relationships thrive. And if you've got any particular questions that you'd like answered, please don't hesitate to reach out to us using the details that you'll see on the screen or in the description below. Send us those questions and we'll consider those questions for future episodes. Finally, we are super excited to announce that we have the Relate WhatsApp community for people who are serious about making their relationships thrive. Why don't you join us by using the details on the screen or the self-adding link that is in the description below. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.